about ready to go, yeah. He's 40 years old. Okay. See, the first Garfields were kind of like just shaped like a triangle, and then they changed the shape. That's enough for Garfield history. Moving back to the future. And so what happened was he wrote this out, they said no. So what I'm going to have you do is just one paragraph. I do want you to read this also. And when you read this, make sure that you notice or you underline, maybe jot on the side, the purpose of what Jefferson is trying to do. But here's the most important thing. When you read a document, especially when you read one in here, but this should be every single time you read anything. So pay attention up here. Think historical context. Think about what's going on. Okay, this idea of you reading an article about, current events today, about something on the border or something, think about what's going on before you read it. But here, think about what was going on in 1776, which you should know now, or at least a good idea, that will cause Jefferson to write this. If you do not think historical context, it just becomes words. Words, 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 words. We've all done that where you start reading, you have no idea what you're reading. Think historical context. What's going on so you can put it into context. And I know I'm making you do that. That makes it harder to do. But if you're able to do that, that little skill, it takes a couple seconds to go through a few things. It makes everything easier to read. It's understandable. It's more interesting. If you got to interpret it down the road, it makes that a lot easier. In fact, hopefully, if you can do that, think about the events going on around that will give you understanding. If you do that naturally, reading becomes significantly easier. Comprehension, reading comprehension does not come from just knowing what the word is on the paper. It's putting it in, plugging it into events going on. I know, obviously, you're not going to know everything that goes on at that time, but if you get a few things, you start putting it together. I'm not kidding. That skill makes things so much easier. And hopefully, you can get to the point where it just comes naturally. It doesn't make you smarter. It doesn't make you more brilliant in you do things. Boy, does it help. I do it automatically. I just do it automatically. And it's because, I just got conditioned to do it, and it makes things easier to read. So I meant when I start reading, okay, I can plug it into things. So what was going on in 1776? If this is about part of the Declaration of Independence, actually, I put down our writing, he has waged a cruel war. Actually, what he wrote down was he had, H-A-T-H. That's what he originally wrote, because there's no dictionaries yet. But what was going on? Well, Declaration of Independence. We know he's in Philadelphia. Jefferson's writing it. The other four, we know that. But let's get back to the key thing. What really matters? Let's review. What were the reasons why the members of the Continental Congress finally decided, let's do it, let's declare independence? Let's review. First off, yeah, the Proclamation of Rebellion, where everyone's going to be disemboweled. Yeah, that's a big deal. What's another one? What's the city? Yeah.
City, I was going to talk about what's his face, free slaves.
Yeah, Lord Dunmore.
Yeah.
And freeing the slaves if they do what?
If they fight.
I wonder if that might have direct impact on what was written right here. That's what we call foreshadowing. What's another one? What city did the British leave? Boston. And what do they want? I mean, they're all thinking we want, land. If you got those basic things, which everyone, hopefully, when we went over that, hopefully that was familiar. You might not be able to recall every one. But once you recall one, doesn't it become easier to recall another? That's when you can tie things together. That's why I keep saying when you review, try to connect it to something. It just makes it easier. If you know those things and read this document, they don't make sense. If it's just random facts, it won't make as much sense. It won't be as interesting, and trust me, you'll forget it a lot faster. So, just underline it. And when I say the purpose is more than just a quick little simple summary. All of you can summarize what's the document says. You're very talented. You could do that. But think about what is Jefferson trying to achieve when he wrote this? So think of it that way. So just have that done by Monday too. One more thing. Just get into the habit of just a quick thought about what's going on. It helps so much. Same thing to reading an article in the news, you know, a report. Just a little background helps. Okay, so let's go to finish up the Declaration of Independence then. Where did we get to in here?
Quality.
For me? I didn't get you in. I'm moving on. Oh, do we get to equality? Do we get equality of opportunity, equality under the law?
Yeah.
And don't forget, this is always a little bit confusing. Oh, perfect. Perfect. You see that? It's in the middle of this round square. In the middle of that one. Oh, symmetry has been reestablished.
How old is that road?
It's got to be over 20 years.
What a new road.
I like the old one. It's like these desks are from the 1980s. I didn't want the new ones. I don't like the new desks because they're really hard. So I make sure you have these. Now you notice I don't sit in them, but they're a little bit more comfortable. See, I care about you. And also, just because. Yeah, some are getting pretty beat up. Where's the one that? You gotta be one. These are pretty old. These are old timers. And you got a lot of them. That's really hammered. That was probably dug off by some kid, you know, some student who's probably in their 40s now. Which is kind of weird to think about, isn't it? All right. Oh, wow. Yeah, think about somebody in the 1990s probably did that. Huh? That's when what?
Is that where your shirt's from?
I think in the 60s. Okay, with that,
The pants
where were we? Equality. Who wrote about life, liberty, and property? John Locke. What is that philosophy called? That there's nothing but darkness, and then the creator, as the great clockmaker, turned the switch. Deism, yeah. And he wasn't part of the Enlightenment, but the scientific revolution. Who made sure we didn't all fly into space? Newton. What did he say in Parliament, by the way? Do you remember? Did I tell you that? A good story. And so we got to equality, we got the announcements. So let's go ahead and finish up the Declaration of Independence. And by the way, I'm going to ask, I'm going to give you 4 choices. You're going to have 2 short IDs on the Declaration of Independence. And if everything goes right, the test will be Wednesday. And it'll be big. I mean, over 2 pounds of paper. Let's go bigger, right? And a mile long. I think there's 24 multiple choice and some short IDs. Next week. And I'm going to give you 4 choices for the Declaration of Independence. 1 will be equality. 1, 2, the other 2, 2 and 3 will be the 2 other parts of the philosophy. And the last one will be the reasons why they declared, which we just went over. I'm not talking about, you don't have it out. The draft of the Declaration of Independence over there. Yeah, there we go. And so we got equality. And I had somebody read before, didn't I? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. By the way, did we, meaning all the people of the colonies, hold these truths to be self-evident that all men were created equal? No! That was like, wow, you're radical lunatics. So with that, so we got to all men are created equal, and endowed by the creator. Okay, we got all men are equal. Who wants to read next? Who would like to read next? Go ahead, McKinney. Where are we at? We got that. Okay. Good. So, endowed by the creator with certain unalienable rights. Creator, that's the deist. I mean, you really can see the deism in this. And don't forget, they did not see it as religion. They saw it as philosophy. Now, even though the country was not that as religious as it would be, let's say, in the 1850s, and someone who was religious in 1770 would not be what we consider religious today. I mean, it's different the way they looked at it. But there would be attack of them saying they're not Christian. People who are religious said this is like their religion. But to men like Washington, they didn't see it that way. This is my philosophy of life. People have different points of view of what they believe. But when we're thinking about deism, it was definitely a reaction to those religious wars of the last century, which I talked about. Don't want that here. So with that, unalienable rights. So that is number 2. 2 rights. What does unalienable mean? Unalienable. Unalienable. You know nothing? On what? There's a word that's there somewhere. Yeah, everyone has them, can't be taken away. And we're not, I don't say we're born with them, but actually that's from the creation. When the creator flipped the switch, everyone has those rights. And they can't be taken away. Which of course then gets into the whole thing, if all humans have these rights and can't be taken away, what about slaves? What about women? I mean, they knew. Did I mention who told Adams to not forget the ladies? Abigail Adams. It's important to understand that it wasn't like in the past they had no choice. Everyone believed that only white men were equal, so that was normal. No, people disagreed. And they knew how they treated slaves. And they knew about the way women were treated. And it's going to get worse for women when the Industrial Revolution hit. And so, all men are created equal unalienable rights. Who would like to read next? I'll stop you gently. Anybody volunteer? We already have one. Go ahead, John.
That among these are life, liberty.
Yep.
Okay. That among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Stop right there. You know, be fast. You did great. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Notice these are not laws. And they're hard to define. And that's what Locke, and that's what Hutchinson, that's what Jefferson, they didn't want people to define these like so life means these 6 things. It's vague, meaning it can change as people change. Our interpretations can grow. The founding fathers were not stuck in time like statues, and we must all be stuck in time. Things change a lot. I mean, just think how much they've changed in the last 10 minutes. I mean, think about it. What's that whole new world? Got an assignment. So with that, what's the first right? What does life mean? Life. And this is definitely one of those where you think, oh, I know what life means. Oh, wait a minute. What is life? What's life? Yes.
Is it like the right to live? Like you're allowed to be alive, but like under certain terms?
You're on the right track, but think about what's alive. A plant's alive. Chicken's alive.
Humans have the right to be alive.
Do humans have that right?
No.
Let's go.
Specific humans have the right to be alive.
Cattle are alive. Slaves are alive. It's more than just life, Jacqueline.
To be like autonomous.
That's it. Autonomous. Meaning, who decides for you if you have truly, so, some humans, it gets vague, but we look at it today, we say all humans. What does it mean when you're autonomous? It means you're what?
Yeah.
A slave, you make no decisions on your own. You have no independence. And so autonomous, or they would have thought the word independent, which means the same thing. You're independent. But that's why they would have thought of it. You're independent. But remember that word for power. That means you are sovereign. I'm trying to write it. You are sovereign. You have power over yourself. Or you can take it to the next step. We, as a people of these colonies, are ultimately sovereign. If you are not independent, then you can have no other rights. If somebody decides for you, or you feel like this can be taken away, you can do nothing else. You must live your entire life at the basic mercy of somebody else. Everyone got that? That's rights. That's life. So it's a lot more than just simply being alive. Even though, let's be clear, that's a big part of it. There's an element of that. Yeah.
But who has the right to decide? Don't get to.
See, this is really complex, isn't it? To John Adams, he would have said, "You really don't have this right if you don't have property, because you don't have anything at stake. If you have property, you have something to lose."
This is so hard for me to wrap my mind around because, like, but it's hard for me to think this way that only certain people get rights and other people don't, and it's just difficult.
And you would not have been alone then. But some people would have been very natural. I'm a little better than other people, so I deserve more rights. Or you could be like what you're saying, no, we're all have rights to life, regardless of who you are. And you just come up to a big disagreement about different ideas about what it means to be in a society. And so, yeah, there was a disagreement then. And now more people might say it's all humans, but even then, there's some differences. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if there'll be fights over that down the road. Next right. Now, liberty, this word would be used all the time after the American colonies were discovered. We were talking about the Mohawks, etc. And liberty is misunderstood a lot. What is liberty? Is it just freedom? More than freedom. What does it mean? What does it mean you can do? What's that? Yeah, you can self-govern. You decide for yourself. In fact, this is what they call it. You know, you have the right to decide for yourself what to do. They had a name for it, because what decides for you? There is freedom, but it's freedom of something. What decides what you do? I mean, if you, okay, I'm freedom to do what I want, and what I want to do is take a hammer and walk through the hallways and hit people with it. I want to do that. But what keeps me from doing that? Do laws? Have you ever broken a law before? Who has a driver's license? Who has driven 26 and a 25? Not in here, right? We would never do that. But out there, people have done that. Why do you do that? You broke the law. But what decides that for you? You're on the right track. What's that? What decides your free will? What decides, okay, I got free will, but what decides whether something is right and wrong? What do we call that? Your what? Your conscience. Exactly. So all of you are on the right track. You're all building up to this concept of freedom of conscience. Freedom of conscience. That's what decides. So we self-government based upon that. Obviously, people have different consciences than others, but that's why I don't walk through the halls with a hammer. Especially when it's crowded, sometimes I do. That's on film. No, I don't. Sorry. You're watching, don't forget. It might be happening someday, but yeah, that's fine. They watch. What? Who said that's not a camera? Next to that chair was yeah, actually, you know what that is? They claim it's a light sensor. They claim. So there's no motion through the light. They claim. We know, right? That's what decides for us, our morality. That's why we don't do those things. So liberty is not doing anything you want. Liberty is weighing what's best. And the idea was we live in a society where our actions can impact others. So you have made the decision, because most of you, I'm assuming, are probably not terrible people. Are you? Who's terrible?
I'm kidding.
Don't point at other people. I was at the third period, like half the class, or first period, half the class raised their hand. I need protection. That's why we have a camera. No, you want to be good. And so you figure, okay, beating people with hammers is bad. But driving 26 and a 25 is probably not so bad. But my guess is you probably don't drive 35 in a school zone, do you? And if you did, you'd feel really guilty about it. No. Come on. And yeah, there is law. But we all decide whether or not to obey the law. Just as you decide whether or not you're going to sit here. I mean, technically, I guess you can all overwhelm me and walk out. You'd lose. But, no. But you don't, right? You've made a conscious decision, okay, the positives outweigh the negatives. The negatives, it's far too warm in here. The positives, you get to see my shirt. So that's freedom of conscience. It is not doing what you want. It is weighing the options. And so when people think liberty, I can do what I want and heck with anybody else. No, that's shockingly negative and will go against everything this country is founded upon. And yes, people still do it all the time. And take great glee in doing whatever they want that might hurt other people. And that's a little bit scary, but that's not what they're talking about here. So that's why we don't speed too much. You go 26, but not 70, right? Shut up if you do. I don't want to know. Do you get the point about that? So it's freedom of conscience. That's why society functions. By the way, they can't do it if we don't have a stable society. Because you don't have a stable society, or society is breaking down, then people just start doing what they want, taking what they want. That's when it starts breaking, falling apart. What's the next right? Pursuit of happiness. Now, this is a little complex. Locke didn't say pursuit of happiness, even though if you would ask the colonists, they talked about this pursuit of happiness was getting what? Yeah, property. I'm calling it property because that's also wealth. But to their point of view, it was land. Remember, this is 1776. Land. And yes, take it from others. And you do have a problem with depriving them of their life and liberty, right? Of course, that's when you can just make the mental juggling and say, well, maybe they're not really people. And that's coming down the road. Property. Now, Locke looked at this as, okay, property. Here's the thing about property. If what you have can be taken away by some authority at any time, can you enjoy your other rights? If everything you have can be taken away. I mean, just imagine if I had the power to take everything you own away anytime I want, at my whim, and there's basically nothing you can do. How would you act? You'd be scared, wouldn't you? Huh? Yeah, I'm a lunatic, and I can take it at any time and take away your stuff. See, I don't like where you're holding your pencil. You lose everything. By the way, how would you act? It's not just scared. How would you act? Are you mad? Are you mad? Are you sure? I guess someone needs to be made an example. You wouldn't just act like, or you wouldn't just do everything I said. You would try to act like the way you think I want you to act. Wouldn't you? And since you're not really sure because I'm really unpredictable, I saw that. So you're just going to be going to act like you're in a police station. Can you truly be independent? Do you have freedom of conscience? No. So property was this idea that if we might lose our property, we lose our other rights. Now, of course, some people say, yeah, so I'm going to accumulate as much property as I want and treat other people this way. There's some elements of that there. But what's our most valuable piece of property? And this is why they changed the pursuit of happiness, because before, most people didn't have property. I mean, today, most people have virtually no property. Most people have virtually none. What is it? The bottom 25% actually have negative property in the United States today. It means they owe more than they owe. What's your most valuable piece of property you have? What about yourself? Your hair. Yes.
It is great.
It's nice hair.
Thank you.
Your potential, your abilities. And that's your most valuable property. What they say, the pursuit of happiness, you can go as far as your abilities take you. You can go as far as your abilities take you. Remember I said equality of opportunity? Isn't that equality of opportunity? So you can enjoy the opportunity. Opportunity. So if you're good at something, you go as far as you can go. And that's how the whole idea is. Everyone should start off with a kind of a blank slate. Locke talked about this. If you have too many people that are born very wealthy, it will skew the system. We should all, everybody should take off on their own merits, which by the way, really hard to do, but as far as they take. Let's get to the last thing then. Let's say my greatest ability is to rob students of their money. And I walk through the office and steal their money. I'm really good at it, right? I mean, I'm good. Is there a problem there? What's the problem? Am I depriving them of their independence? If I just take everything they have? Am I depriving them of their ability to be free because I'm coming behind them with a hammer to steal their money? Can they go as far as their ability to take them when there's always me there to steal from them because I'm really good at it? All of these, you do these rights. As long as you don't, the last thing you should get, you can't infringe on other people's rights. You can't infringe on their rights, which, by the way, is really complex, isn't it? How do you judge that? You got rights? Everyone sound like they're righted? Can't believe I just said righted. Those are rights. And so, yes, they're vague. Yes, they're open. But the thing about it is that the vast majority of men who wrote this would have thought white men were property, and as time changed, that would change. I can't guarantee what everyone thinks, but more and more people think it's all humans. But even then, there's a disagreement what that means. So they're vague. They grow. Just as we all grow. So, rights. Should we get to number 3? I'm looking for a volunteer. Who, pray tell, would like to read again? Well, you read once, but you hardly got to read. You want to read more. All right, I'll let you.
That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government.
So, to secure these rights, number 3, and the name of this is the social contract. The social contract. The social contract. That's secured now. Locke did not call this. Jefferson didn't call this. This is from a book by a French philosopher by the name of Rousseau. Some of you might have heard of him. Who's kind of all over the place. But now that's what we call this. Rousseau. We call this Rousseau. We call this the social contract. So this is a contract or a deal made amongst people. And remember the idea of the Enlightenment. You could have natural laws to govern society. So this is a natural law. And it's a contract. So it's a deal. It's a deal we have made. So what is the deal? What are governments for? Governments are there to do what? Say it again. How? It says it right there. He said it. John read it very carefully as he was waiting with bated breath for me to stop. Huh? To secure rights. That's what government's there, to secure rights. And who gives the government power? The people. That means the people are, what's the word for power? Sovereign. So the people are sovereign, and they give people rights. So the people give up a little bit So government to protect all rights. So that's laws, that's society. And let's be clear about it. Laws are great or bad, depending on your point of view. But they're not as important as this idea that we're all together as a society and we all live together. And we understand that our actions can affect others and vice versa. That's more important than the actual laws, because don't forget, liberty is not the laws, it's our own conscience. And when societies break down, that's when the whole thing breaks down. When people decide, the heck with it, I'm on my own, then this is breaking down. And so with that, security, people are powerful. But let's get to the next thing. Now, who would like to read after, where do we finish here? Consent of the governed in the hyphen. Who would like to read next? Somebody who has not read yet. You want me just to pick someone at random? John has read quite well. Who would like to read? If no one is volunteering, thank you, Maren.
Whenever any form of government becomes constructive of peace, right of the people, or abolish it, institute new government, laying its foundation of principles, organizing its powers, and such as to them shall seem most likely to.
Good. Perfect. Well done. Yes, I have broken mine. So with that, so the next part. Let's say government infringes on rights. If government infringes on rights, what must the people do? Abolish it. Now, what does abolish mean? It doesn't necessarily mean full-scale revolution and fighting in the streets. It could be a new constitution. It could be amending whatever your government is. It could be a new election. Or it could be revolution. But it's a change to the government if you believe this. And there's something else. Who does not believe you're infringing on people's rights? The people who make up the government. Remember, the government are the people, so they're people. And so anytime you believe there might be infringing on rights, there will probably be just as many, if not more, people saying, no, they're not infringing on rights. Does that make sense? So this is actually really hard to prove. Not always, but I would say only about 99% of the time. And you might have something that just happened to you as an individual and say, that's an infringement on rights and we must rebel, and everyone says, get over it. And so it could be complex. But that is the people must change it. Who would like to read next? So where are we at here? Safety and happiness. Looking for a volunteer. Emma, you want to do it? You look like you're about ready to raise your hand, so. Yeah, we're.
Okay.
Yeah, it's you know, you said it's has shown, but he said hath shewn. Okay. No, you're good. It's just funny how he wrote that. So with that, and so the point is, there can be like little bits of change, you know, but we just kind of accept it. And maybe you have to accept it. Times change, maybe if you have a war or something else, you might have some rights taken away, rights come back. But here's what he's saying there. Remember I gave you this point before. It could be a slippery slope, where sometimes rights are taken away, we might not realize it. You know, little bits, and next thing you know, you have full-scale turn. It's the boiled frog analogy. You know what the boiled frog analogy is? The story is, and it's not quite true, but people say it. You stick a frog in a pot on a stove and cold water, and the frog will be in the water. You just willing to turn the heat, and they won't notice. Don't do that. Is that frog? We're the only cool people. You guys are cool. 3. Where'd you have frog? 4. Where'd you have frog? Huh? At home?
Minnesota, that one.
Minnesota home. In Louisiana, yeah. I frog too. In a place called, oh yeah, Bayou. Yes.
What do you example in this time of the government continuing their rights? Like, is there specific thing you can say?
When, for example, you start seeing things like, a good one where you see this kind of slippery slope is where they begin to change the rules on, like, say, illegal search and seizure, where they open it up and start searching your home without a warrant. Or you can do that. That's actually one of the slippery slope things that happen after September 11th. Because all they have to do is say, hey, we think there's a terrorist, and then you get a secret order that no one knows about and search you out. It's part of what's called a Patriot Act. They can do that right now, and you would never know.
They don't have to have a warrant.
They won't have to. They don't have to have a public warrant.
Oh.
It's all in secret. And the problem is when it's all in secret, nobody knows if you really have it or not. Other countries have done that, and they just abuse it. They say, I got a warrant, but it's secret. Yeah, that's what actually is happening. So that you could argue was a slippery slope. I mean, what we consider to be rights today, you have far fewer rights than I did when I was your age. When you were mine. When I was your age. There we go. Did I say when I was my age? There were things that would have never been acceptable when I was in high school that are acceptable. Bridges on privacy. It's kind of startling, but it happened very slowly. Did you like frog? Did you like frog? Like? You didn't like it? It's like frog, isn't it? So, slippery. Okay. So, lastly, where are we at here? But when a long train of, I'll read this last part, because this is kind of a weird one. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations is literally the taking of rights, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and provide new guards for future security. And so when it's a slippery slope, there are two things about it. First off, how do we know if there's a slippery slope to losing rights? It just happened. We wake up someday and it happened. Let's get back to this. He said it is the duty of the people to do this. It's not a choice. It's your duty. Because if you don't use the power you have, then you have abdicated your power and you're letting somebody else rule for you, aka you no longer have life, you no longer have liberty, and you no longer have the pursuit of happiness. You have given it away. So it is your duty. But how do you know if there is a slippery slope? How do you know that rights have been taken away? How do you know? What is your next responsibility? You must do what? What's that? Read stuff. Yeah.
But not everyone can read.
You're on the right butt. What did you say? So provide new guards means like that's actually changing the government to provide guards. We have to pay attention. What the word is, we have to remain vigilant. We must remain vigilant. Because you're right about reading stuff. If we're not paying attention, who's paying attention for us? They might be smart, but they might be the same people who are taking our rights away. And as we all know, they only care about you. No, them. So, okay, I made a mistake there. So we have a responsibility. We have to pay attention. If you don't pay attention, then somebody else will pay attention for you. And so that's why, in fact, that's one of the big reasons why in the First Amendment there is a freedom of the press. Freedom of press cannot be taken away by Congress. That's why that's there. There's not a freedom of the press. Freedom of the press can't be taken away from Congress. And so we have that responsibility. If we don't, somebody else will do it for you, and they might have other ideas. Or they might lie or play on your fears and get you to actually give up your rights. Every tyrant throughout history has always came to power, not because they have the most guns. They come to power because they all say, I am going to protect you. I'm going to protect you from your enemies who are coming for you. I'm going to protect you from people who are out to get you. Implying they're going to protect your rights. Every single one. And they're not necessarily telling you the truth. So, everyone. And that's an important thing to understand. They all say they're going to protect rights. If you're not vigilant, and somebody might disagree. So that's the basic element of social contract. So we have equality, rights, social contract. Those would be 3 of your choices. You're going to have 4 for 2 of these short IDs you have up to that. Sound good? So then the rest of the Declaration of Independence is basically, so this is, we got the philosophy down. The next major part are the grievances. Grievances. And this is where they lay down, this is important, how the government took away their rights. They lay it down as we have these rights, we're equal, yet we're not equal. Britain sees themselves as more equal. We don't have these rights, and they took away their power. But here's the important thing. Who took away their power? Who took away their rights in the colonies? Look at this. You notice it says, he has refused to assent to law. He has forbidden. He has refused. He has called. He has dissolved. Who is he? They focused on the tyrant. King George III. By any measure of kings in 1776, King George was no tyrant. But that's what they said. It's a lot easier to focus on one evil person than 500 members of parliament. Think about it. If you want to get mad at, is it easier to get mad at Congress or is it mad to get mad at the president? The president, you get mad at Congress, but that's a vague, that's a big group. The tyrant focus your anger. It's hard to get to talk about tyrants too. People then, oh yeah, I remember people I don't like. Yeah, they're becoming another tyrant like this person. In fact, if you get an argument over virtually anything, it's kind of fun to get up your watch and time. How soon somebody will mention Hitler. They're going to mention Hitler. It's just a matter of time. Because he's the tyrant that everyone compares to, which is actually kind of amusing. And most people have no idea how. They just know Hitler was bad. And so, King George is the tyrant. They blame it on him. Find the tyrant. And so with that, and yeah, you can blame Congress. That's vague. Parliament, vague. And they blame him for everything. Look at the last page. They literally blame him for everything. So, third from the bottom on the left-hand side you're looking at. He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us. Incited domestic insurrection meaning the king has caused what? Specifically, what kind of insurrection? Remember Lord Dunmore. What type of insurrection? Slave rebellions. The king has caused slave rebellions. In slave societies, their greatest fear is slave rebellion. Don't forget, slaveholders know how bad they treat the slaves. They know. They know. And they know how they would want revenge too. So they blame the king for slave rebellion. Like King George is there saying, all right, you slaves were perfectly happy until I incited you to rebel. When the slaves had no reason to rebel. Oh, slaves have reason to rebel. Next. And he has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages. Wow. Whose rules of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. So now he's also implying that the various tribes along the frontier, desperate to keep their land, are only doing it because King George III got them to do it. Is that the reason they're trying to defend their land, because of King George? What is he doing? There's a word for it. Now, I wrote it up here because I always forget to spell it. And I've mentioned this once before. This is demagoguery. What is demagoguery? playing on people's fears. So when you go to tyrant school to learn how to become a tyrant, I think that's next year, actually, start that. What's the first thing you do? Don't say, I'm going to be a tyrant. Say, everyone's out to get you and I will protect you. The king is going to incite rebellion, I will protect you. Look all around us. There's enemies. You're at their mercy, unless you do what? Side with whom? Yeah, whoever telling you, you're exactly right. Tyrants will find your enemies. We'll get to what fascism is, and the big thing about fascism is, I'll get your enemies. And the big enemy of fascists, communists. That's what they'll say. And so, the last thing. In this Declaration of Independence, it also says, near the very end, let me read you the last thing right before the bell ring. I know. But, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, General Congress assemble, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for rectitude of our attentions, do, in name and authority by the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are and right ought to be free and independent states. Wow. What have they just created? A country called the United States, or 13 independent states that used to be, the day before, colonies. But they wouldn't have been independent states if not for the country called the United States. There'd be no states without the country United States. Who's sovereign? The states, individual states, or the country called the United States? You see how it's not clear. Why? Because they knew we couldn't make it clear we divided. As luck would have it, there'd be a little war fought about this. Playing out people's fears. Ha! You scared? I played on your fears.
Single time I would jump. It's not funny.
I'm not laughing. I'm crying. That's my emotional release for you. Feel better now? Yes! What a play! And it's a really short paragraph.
Have I ever lost her? I said, have I ever back?
No. Just jot it down. Underline or jot maybe on the side. You do not need to write a paragraph for the draft of the Declaration of Independence.
I read it.
That's like the only argument I ever backed down.
I know. I've wondered about that too. And there's not much about him. I actually looked into that. William. That is a cool parent, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Also, there's like 5 different Georges on here.
Georges.
There's like 4 different Johns, and then
Well,
2 Thomases, 3 Benjamins.
they're English.
2 Samuels. Oh my god.
Okay, all those are very English names. And then George was king. So they were all born when King George II was king. William Williams, I know. What? There are cats on my shirt, yes. It is very, and not that kind of a 60s view when the Jetsons came out, late 60s. 60s view of the future kind of stuff. Yeah, I like it. Well played.
We just have to
See, I feel like we did. I like have a feeling that we had something that's due Monday that we need.
Oh, originally it was due today, but then we changed it.
Yeah. I know this thing right now.
I think football and
Is it not right here? Oh, that's where. Yeah, like right there. Oh my goodness. Smallest county in Texas, it's so bigger than that. Like 100,000 people in that county. But for a suburb of Dallas. Not that big. You see here, this is, you're telling me you're so smart. This is not enough. I think a lot of people are missing. Oh.
I'm driving. If I give him 2 times. Yeah.
I'm so scared.
He's just checking. He's just. Right.
What a long text.
Yeah, public.
What do you do? I think it's never.
Yeah, we might do that. Male population is top. Hey, I would drive to.
I'm driving.
If it's valuable, I'll take it. Now, here's the great thing about private, it will do nothing for you.
Now listen.
If it is something that will annoy me, then it will probably hurt you for the rest of your career. No, I don't do that. 10? Ooh, put it in the column. Put it in the column.
Hey, listen.
Wait, you're just giving him money.
B minus on the test.
No, it doesn't work that way.
You just
I
gave
know.
him
I will take it, but I'm impeccably honest. So it will not help or hurt you. But I will take your valuables if you want to give me. Yeah, that's nice. I'm a nice person. So if you want to give me everything of value you have, I'll take it.
Let me give you one.
No, these-
I need to
Just
pay my
give you
car.
our glasses.
See, I'll take your money.
It's your tip for the day.
Huh?
We're playing for what?
I'll take
My
it.
birthday. Okay.
Here, let me show you. I'll show you. All right, shall we begin? Did you see that? I'm not a circus act. I just do. All right. So, a couple things. Take out the Declaration of Independence, your notes, but also take out that packet with the fornication laws. A few of you have not turned in online. And if I don't get that, I mean, that's like the easiest points ever. I'm just basically, you got it. We talked about it in class. It should be very easy. But we have to make sure that thing works. Now, I'm hoping we won't have to go online. So we have to be ready.